What's up, my friends? Welcome. Today we're talking about the 2023 base pay chart for the military. There might be some examples that I'm talking about specifically for the United States Army, but for the most part, the pay chart, the pay rate, and everything for your different ranks is the same no matter which branch of service you're in. So we're going to kind of dive into it. I know commonly a lot of people look at just the base pay and they're like, holy crap, that's so low. I can make way better money doing this and this job, whatever kind of a thing. But there's also some other factors you need to make sure to understand too with the military. And I'm going to kind of cover those inside of here. I'm also going to use some scenarios to kind of help you kind of determine how much money you could possibly be making in the military, being in the Army, whatever it's going to be, to kind of factor into your scenario. A lot of this is focused on individuals joining the Army because we're going to be talking about like the base pay rate for individuals that have less than 2 years in the Army, because after you do have more than 2 years in the military, really, it does go up to another bracket to where you do start making more money the longer you've been in the military at whatever rank you're at. Now, the numbers that we're going to go over is for active duty, right? The full-timer individuals, this is what your paycheck might look like type of thing. For those of you that are going to be going like Reserves, National Guard, it works a little bit differently, and I don't really have the experience to know how to like figure that out. Maybe you do, or there's other ways to figure it out. But for the most part, this is what you would make, on active duty. So we're going to dive into it and kind of talk about what you might be making in 2023 with some other factors in there and talk about some scenarios. We're going to start off with, let's say you came in just the bare minimum, E1, right? You're a private in the Army. You didn't have any college experience. You didn't get a buddy to join, whatever, less than 2 years in the Army. What are you looking at for your paycheck? Well, base pay for an E1 is going to be $1,917 per month. But in the Army, you do get paid twice a month. So it's going to be $958 per paycheck because you get paid on the 1st and the 15th of the month, which is twice a month. Now, if the 1st or the 15th falls on a holiday or a weekend, you get paid the day prior. So that's roughly what your paycheck would look like before taxes do get taken down. And again, you're probably looking at $958 per paycheck, and you're like, I make more than that at such and such place. There's other factors. Stick around a little bit later. I'm going to talk about those factors you need to be factoring in there. Don't just look at that number to decide if that's worth it for you or not. Now, this pay is actually $84 more than it was last year. So each year they do raise the pay charts. They do give everybody kind of a raise essentially for the pay grade and everything for inflation and whatnot. So $84 more than if you had joined in 2022. But from here, we're going to move over to E2. Let's say you did get a buddy to join, a little bit of college education, whatever. That's going to be $2,149 per month, which when you split it in half, that comes down to roughly $1,074 per paycheck that you'd be looking at before taxes get taken out. And this is $94 more than what you would have been making last year. Then from here, we're going to move over to E3. So maybe you have an associate's degree. Certain other factors allow you to come in the Army as an E3, as a private first class in the Army anyways. That's $2,259 per month, which comes down to $1,129 per paycheck before taxes get taken out. And this is $98 more than what soldiers were making last year. E4, maybe you come in the Army with a bachelor's degree. You don't want to go officer type of thing. So you're coming in as an E4. $2,503 per month is what you'd be looking at, but then your paycheck would look at about $1,251 per paycheck for your base pay anyways, and that is a $110 more per month scenario than what you would have been looking at last year. But if you do decide that, hey, I do have that bachelor's degree, I'm doing ROTC, I'm going to OCS, whatever the factor is, and you want to become an officer, well, as an O1, that very first off lieutenant that you're kind of coming into the Army as is commissioning, that's $3,637 per month, which comes out to $1,818 per paycheck. Again, that's not all officers would be getting paid because they would be in one of the scenarios we're talking about later. So their paycheck would look higher than this, but this is just the base pay portion of their paycheck at least anyways. That is $160 more than what they would have been making last year though, however. So we're going to get into some of this pay scenarios. There are factors in here that you want to know about. Maybe if you're a married individual, how much you be making, because married individuals do make more money than single individuals, and there's factors as to why, and I'll kind of explain that. So maybe that's something that's important to you and you kind of want to figure out what would it be making with a family. So we'll run through one of those scenarios. One of those scenarios kind of involves being an E2. And I use the example of an E2 because you're usually not an E1 for very long. It's pretty quick before you're moving up to E2. And there's other ways you can kind of factor out your own. I'm going to have a link down in the description box down below for the pay chart and all sorts of other kind of materials for you to help figure out your own scenario. But just for this specific scenario, we're going to be in E2. and stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado, because it does matter where you're stationed at as far as how much you'd be getting paid and making. So you have that same base pay. Even though you're married, you still have the same base pay. That doesn't change. The other factors that do change when you are married in this scenario is BAH, that basic allowance for housing, which is the money that the Army, the military is going to pay you for being able to get a place to live. Because if you're married, you can't live in the barracks. If you're single, you have a free place to live. You're going to live in the barracks. Sometimes they're not the greatest. Sometimes they're pretty decent. But for married individuals, they can't live in those barracks. That's only for single soldiers. So they're going to pay you extra. In this case, for Fort Carson area, $2,007 is what they're going to be paying you extra. So that way you can find an apartment, find a place to live off post to go and rent. If you want to live on post and on post housing, then they're just not going to pay you that $2,007. They're just going to give you a house on post to live in, rent free type of thing. So those are kind of some of the factors. Additionally, if you are in a married scenario, you also receive BAS, which is basic allowance for subsistence. That's basically food money, right? Money for you to get food. If you're single, you have the chow hall that you go and you show your ID card and they scan it or whatever and they show that you're single and you just let you on through and you go pick out whatever you want to go eat. If you're married, you can still eat in the chow hall, but you have to pay for it because you're receiving that extra money. For this one, it doesn't matter where you're at. It does vary based on if you are a enlisted soldier or an officer, as the rate for enlisted soldiers for BAS is $452 that you receive extra with that paycheck. So now your paycheck is looking a little bit bigger. That is $4,608 per month because of all these benefits you're getting because you're in the married factor kind of scenario, which when you look at your paycheck they're getting on the 1st and the 15th comes out to roughly $2,304 before taxes get taken out. So taxes do stuff to come out of this, right? And that is going to depend on where your home of record is, if your state takes out state taxes, if they exempt you for being military, because there's some states that exempt military from state taxes, but then you still have federal taxes that have to get taken out. So it won't be that exact number of 2004. There's other things that get taken out, but that's a good kind of baseline to kind of judge it off of. And then somewhere's in there, some things get taken out. Now, if you're trying to compare that to the civilian world, for this factor of being a married individual as an E2, if you're E3, E4, well, obviously it's going to be more money. But with the factor of being an E2, this is basically equal to roughly I say, about $29 an hour as a civilian job. Now, civilian job is hourly, where military is more like salary based because it doesn't matter how many hours you're working, you're going to pay the same. But if we're trying to kind of compare it to like, you trying to get a job in the civilian world, right? If you want to make the same amount of money as a married E2 is going to be making, you're going to have to find a job that's roughly paying you about $29 per hour. And that may be very hard to do straight out of high school. There's a lot of people sometimes in the comment section are like, man, they're really looking at just the base pay, right? They're looking at the base pay alone and that's it. And they're like, I can make more than that at working at Target, working at Walmart, working at a fast food place, whatever, right? Well, I don't think that fast food place is going to pay you $29 an hour in this scenario. And this is roughly kind of the same kind of a thing of what it's equal to. If you're single, you're just not actually getting this money because you're getting free rent, you're getting free, food and everything like that. But it's kind of a way to kind of base it or judge it off of. Now, in that scenario for Fort Carson area, $2,000 could probably get you a decent apartment, a pretty good decent apartment, a place to live in the Fort Carson, Colorado Springs area. And the barracks on Fort Carson probably are not worth $2,000 a month. So yeah, you probably could get a better place to live, but nonetheless, you're not having to pay rent, right? If you're working as in a civilian job, your paycheck has to cover you to be able to pay rent, has to cover you to be able to get food, right? In the military, a lot of that stuff is all covered. So you're taken care of in that kind of environment. So we're going to talk about how to calculate your own kind of factors, right? Whether you're going to be coming in as E1, E2, single, married, whatever the case is, it's a very easy equation to figure out. All you have to do is look at whatever your base pay is, whatever your rank is, that you're coming into the Army, you're going to be in the Army as, or in the military, add up the BAH for your duty station. I'll add a calculator if I have a good one down in the description box down below for you to utilize, where you can put in your rank, because it does change based on your rank. The higher in rank you go, the higher your basic allowance for housing becomes. And then it also factors in based on where you're going to be stationed at. So you put in the zip code and it gives you the 2023 rates. You add in the BAS, which I forgot to change the numbers on here. This is actually the old numbers. These numbers for BAS for enlisted and officers actually have gone up, but it's easy Google search to do. But add in your BAS if you're married, and then that will give you your monthly pay. If you are single, well, you're living in the barracks, so you don't need BAH, you don't need BAS because you're going to be eating in the chow hall type of thing. You can get your own food if you want to, but you have it covered if you like to utilize it that way. So all you have to do is just take that total that you did with the base pay, BAH, BAS, if you're a married soldier, divide that by 2, and that roughly gives you what your paycheck roughly will be before taxes get taken out on the 1st and the 15th. But for single soldiers, to figure out yours, it's just that base pay, but you don't have to worry about rent, utilities, food, all that kind of stuff, because that's also a key factor, right? A lot of people don't factor in when they're looking at pay for the military, right? If you are working a civilian job, whatever that civilian job is, in that paycheck that they're paying you, you have to use some of that money to pay for you to live somewhere, for you to have an apartment, for you to have a house, whatever. Unless you plan on living with your parents forever, you're going to have to factor that in there. In the military, that's covered. You're either going to pay extra for it, or you're going to be provided with a place to live. In your paycheck for your civilian job, you have to factor in that part of that paycheck is going to have to be used for you to go grocery shopping to get food. You don't have to worry about that necessarily in the Army, because either they're going to pay you extra to get food, or you're going to be covered if you're single, type of thing. Medical insurance, if you are someone that cares about, health kind of things, you want to be able to see a doctor, you have a family, whatever, 100% of your medical is covered on the enlisted and officer side. On active duty, if you're going Reserve, National Guard, you have to pay for it, but it's pretty cheap, and it still gives you a pretty amazing coverage. But let's say on active duty, right, you don't have to pay anything extra. You're just getting 100% coverage type of thing. You're not going to get that on the civilian side. On the civilian side, you'd be pretty damn lucky to have an employer that covers 100% medical coverage. I've never heard of anybody that I don't think does that. Most places have it where they have medical coverage that they'll provide at a discounted rate. So maybe you're paying $200, $500, whatever it is, and then you still have co-pays and all sorts of other things, certain things they don't cover, where on the military side, you don't pay anything extra for your on active duty, and 100% of everything is just covered. So you're not going to find that same kind of a thing on a civilian job. So those are other things you need to make sure you're factoring in, because a lot of times people just look at that base pay and that's it. And they think, man, that just base pay is less than what I make working at this location, whatever the thing is, making minimum wage, whatever kind of a thing. And that, if that's all you made in the Army, then yeah, that would probably be pretty horrible. But there are those other factors you have to factor in: living, food, medical, all that stuff, right? Education that you get when you get out of the Army, if you want to use education, all sorts of benefits. So make sure you're looking at the big picture, but hopefully this information that I give you gives you a good example as to how to kind of look at it, how to factor in what you possibly could be making, and how to, decide your budget and everything for being in the military. Especially as a married soldier, you make pretty good money, I feel like, as a married soldier. If you're going to have your spouse still working too, well, then you still have that extra income from your spouse. But in some scenarios, you might be able to live off of just that alone and allow your spouse to be a stay-at-home mom or maybe a stay-at-home dad, if you're one of those lucky individuals kind of a thing. I don't know. But there's a lot of factors in there to make sure you kind of to be able to look at it as the big picture, right? And don't just look at solely the base pay. Otherwise, yeah, that looks pretty low. There's a lot of other factors. So make sure you're being educated, you're doing the research, you're factoring in all the other factors other than just looking at the pay chart. I'll have links down in the description box down below if you want to kind of check some of that stuff out. Now, I want you to stay informed about the United States Army. So make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. That way you continue getting information from my YouTube channel here. If you want to check out a video, check this one out right here. YouTube says that this is a pretty good one for you to watch. So watch it, check it out, stay educated, stay informed. Check out links down in the description box down below for my social media, for my affiliate links. I'm Christopher Chaos. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you next time. See ya.